The Volkswagen Passat was once the quirky, German, semi-luxurious player in the mid-size sedan segment. You bought one because it was much nicer and more premium than the competition, but that wasn't doing so well sales-wise in America. So in 2011, they decided to change it. The 2011 Passat went in an entirely different direction, deciding to be a little bit more plain and mainstream, but very big in terms of size. Now in its second generation, they've technically just facelifted it for the 2020 model year. The American Passat continues on as sedan sales continue to slow. Can Volkswagen's changes for this second generation of the Americanized Passat work wonders for their sales numbers? That's what we're here to find out today. Let's check out what the 2020 Volkswagen Passat is all about. Volkswagen is calling this an all-new model, but you couldn't really tell from up front. I mean, this really does look like the outgoing Passat. I guess the headlights are a little bit different and they've definitely shaped the bumpers just a little bit, but this is still a very plain Jane design, even when finished in this very lovely shade of tourmaline blue metallic. If not for this color, this car would definitely not stand out in a crowd. We have the SEL model, which is the top model, but not the sportiest one. You can get an R-line model that's a little bit below this. We do have 18-inch wheels here that look okay, but there's really just not a lot going on this side profile that really gets you excited about the Passat. Here around the back, we do have some more unique, noticeable changes here. The outgoing Passat had sort of a more rounded taillight. This is sort of a more long and vertical taillight, so I do notice a difference back here. That's going to be the easiest way to spot this new Passat from the outgoing one, but this American-built Passat just really doesn't look that special to me. It kind of just feels lackluster here on the exterior. So the Passat is pretty plain Jane on the outside, and unfortunately things don't really get all that much more exciting here on the interior. In fact, my camera guy Kelso was hopping in to film some B-roll of this interior, and he hopped out and asked me, is this the base model of the Passat? And that doesn't exactly bode well for Volkswagen, because this is the fully loaded SEL model. So you can get a Passat for about $23,000 for the S model. This SEL model that we have is $31,000, $32,000 with destination, and I'm just not seeing that in terms of the interior. We do have this little tiny screen here, their App Connect screen. It's only 6.5 inches. It's got these huge buttons to the side of it. To put things in perspective, I just want to put my phone up next to it. You can see it's really not all that much bigger than my Pixel 3 XL, so this does look really small, especially for 2020. Now, the functionality of it is pretty good. You have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, pretty good voice commands as well. It's tied to a Fender audio on this SEL model, and I've only listened to it a few times, but I gotta say, I've listened to other Fender units that sound pretty okay, but for some reason the one in this car is really not very clear, so I don't know if it's just the unit they put in the Passat, because I've heard other decent Fender units before. The one in the GLI sounded okay, this one does not. It does have factory navigation as well at this level. It's controlled here on this little chip, little SD card that comes right in the slot. And we do have heated seats, no ventilated seats available, which is kind of weird considering the GLI I tested did have them, which is nice. We do get dual zone automatic climate control though, which is nice. Now we have some storage space here in front of the shifter. That's nice to put your phone with a USB to plug in for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay functionality. We have a nice backup camera as well, although the screen is quite small, and we do not get moving trajectory lines here on the backup camera. We also have parking sensors, and this vehicle will park itself using this function, although I did try it and it is not the most elegant or intuitive self-parking system that I've tried. Now the materials in here are just meh. I wouldn't say they're amazing. The seats are pretty nice leather, as is the steering wheel, but the upper dash is soft material. The mid parts of the cards are hard plastics. There's a lot of hard plastic throughout here. This is not the old school Passat that really felt like a high dollar luxury car. This definitely feels more like a mainstream, more basic option that just happens to be very large. Now you don't get much here in the gauge cluster, just some basic gauges with a little bit of red to make it a little sportier, but a little helper screen in the middle with like a little bit of color thrown in, nothing too crazy here to speak of. We do have our driving functions here, our safety functions on the steering wheel, including the adaptive cruise control, although what I will say is Volkswagen does not offer as many standard safety features as competitors like Toyota and Honda that are now offering adaptive cruise control on all trim levels. Volkswagen has not reached that level here on the Passat yet, and even when you do get adaptive cruise control here on this SEL trim, it cancels at 12 miles an hour, meaning you can't use it in stop and go traffic, which is what I think is the most useful time to use adaptive cruise control. The rear seat is where the Passat shines. This car is so big, Dikembe Mutombo himself would have no problem fitting back here. I've got over 39 inches of legroom. You can see I can cross my legs easily, no problem, and have plenty of room without my knees even coming close to touching. Headroom is quite good as well because we have sort of a rounded roof that comes up here where my head sits. We also have heated seats back here with 2 USB ports to charge as well as air vents. But what I will say is, while this back seat space is excellent, the Honda Accord technically has a little bit more with just over 40 inches of rear legroom. And just like the back seat, the Passat does really well with 15.9 cubic feet of storage. This is a massive voluminous trunk. You can get even more by pulling these 2 tabs to fold down the rear seats, although what I will note is that the Accord technically has more with just over 16 cubic feet of space. So again, the Passat is really good in this category, but not quite the best in the segment. And honestly, I do believe at this point, if your goal is to get the car with the biggest back seat and the biggest storage space, you're probably not looking at a sedan like the Passat. You're probably going to want to look at an SUV like the Tiguan. All right, so now that we've checked out the exterior and all of those good things on the Passat, let's see how this new model drives. We only have one engine option under the hood. It's a 2-liter, 4-cylinder turbocharged engine producing 174 horsepower and 206 pound-feet of torque, which is way up from the last generation model on the torque figure. Still going out through a 6-speed automatic to the front wheels only. You can no longer get all-wheel drive on a Passat. Now, the power figure is nothing spectacular. The engine is kind of nothing spectacular. It's like a detuned version of what you'd get in like a GTI or a GLI. I'm not a huge fan of how this particular engine sounds. It's a little bit drony, but it does produce adequate torque, and with only 6 gears to change, when you put your foot on the throttle, it does get up to speed quickly, 7.6 seconds to 60 miles an hour, which is fine. It's a reasonable amount of speed for a car like this. The only thing that you can really do in terms of drive modes is you can drop the shifter here into the S mode, and that's just going to make the transmission a little bit more eager to shift, although it's really not uneager as it is. 6 gears doesn't sound like a lot. You know, you're getting a lot of cars now with 8 and 10 speed transmissions, but Volkswagen does do a pretty smooth transmission. This isn't a dual clutch or anything tricky like that, just a normal Tiptronic automatic, but it shifts very smoothly, and I really don't have any problems with the transmission. I just think the engine is a little unremarkable. I would have liked to have seen maybe some hybridization. I know Volkswagen is going hardcore into the electric car market with the upcoming ID.4, which is kind of leaving gas engine models like this Passat just feeling very old school. Now, it produces okay fuel economy, 23 mpg in the city, 34 on the highway, and 27 combined. And thus far, I've done around that. I've actually only managed to get about 19 mpg, although we've been doing a lot of sitting for filming purposes, so you should expect to get a little bit better than that. The ride comfort is good, but I would not say outstanding on this Passat model. It feels very Germanic. If you've ever driven a German car, a Jetta, an older Passat, it feels very light. All of the controls are very light. The steering does not have a lot of effort to it, but it is reasonably direct for a model like this. The brakes are squishy. So this is a very quiet and comfortable and compliant car, but it just doesn't feel spectacular to me in any way. I really miss that when they used to do the VR6 motor in the Passat. That was a 3.6 liter V6 with around 280 horsepower. That was what felt exciting to me. So right now, the only thing you can get in terms of sport is the R-Line model, and really all that gets you is paddle shifters here on the steering wheel. There's no way to get any more power here on the Passat. So again, after driving the GLI a few weeks ago, the only thing you're really getting with this Passat is bigger size, a little bit better fuel economy, but I think the GLI is just a much more compelling package. It's big enough, it's much sportier, and it costs about the same. So in terms of driving dynamics, I'm kind of left cold by the new Passat. So that was the 2020 Volkswagen Passat. Now, Volkswagen definitely has pricing on its side for this guy over here. It starts at about $23,000. This one is the SEL model, so that's gonna be about $31,000, making this pretty affordable option in the midsize space. You can get ones that are much more expensive than that from competitors. However, I do think that even at only $31,000, the Passat is missing out on a lot of options that you'll find elsewhere in the segment. The thing that it does best is that back seat and trunk, although as we've shown, it's not necessarily the biggest in those respects, leaving the Passat somewhat of a befuddling, confusing option in the segment. If you really love the plain styling, although this color does help it quite a bit, and just the German feel and German engineering aspect of it, the Passat is an interesting option, but it doesn't do too much to make it a compelling option in a very crowded and dwindling midsize sedan segment. We really hope you've enjoyed this review of the 2020 Volkswagen Passat. Let us know your thoughts on the Passat down in the comment section. And for more information on this car, be sure to click the link in the description below to be taken to CarBuzz.com. And don't forget to leave us a like, hit the notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. I'll see you next time.